Georgia goes to Kentucky, the giant grocery bag, 2:30 Central Time on CBS. Georgia is a 22.5 point favorite. The over/under is at 48.5. This is a game that has a chance to get pretty ugly for the Kentucky Wildcats, Hammer.
It does. For all the hype preseason around the whole Kentucky program, around Will Levis, things have kind of come crashing back to earth. And look, we've said over and over again how good of a job Mark Stoops has done. Obviously, I still believe that. And this is sort of just a regression to the mean. I mean, it's still Kentucky football. Expecting them to win 9, 10 games every year, I think is still a little bit unrealistic. Not saying it's not possible. It's just never been done before. So to all of a sudden expect that, I think is a little outlandish. So, you're looking at a 6-6, 7-5 team, which is pretty good historically for Kentucky. They're, unfortunately, they're playing the best team in the country right now, and I think you're right. From what we've seen from Kentucky's offense, it's hard to imagine them scoring really anything on Georgia this weekend. Their best asset right now is Chris Rodriguez. It's really hard to run on Georgia, so it's hard for me to see Kentucky, finding points in this game. And on the other side, Georgia, I'm assuming it's going to be a real cold one this weekend again in Lexington. So I can see Georgia just sort of putting the clamps down on defense and kind of running the ball and just trying to get out of there with a win. But this game could get very ugly for Kentucky if they don't come out really, really with their hair on fire, ready to play.
Yeah, boss man. Will Levis started the season as a top 5 draft pick, and everything's going, and now it's looking like he'll be lucky to be an XFL backup. What do you think's going into this game?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think all these NFL GMs are going to reach for Will Levis. We've talked about it since the start of the year. The hype train just went out of control for Will Levis. And I don't think that ever really should have been there. It was just it was looking at his measurables, those combine measurables that everyone got excited about. But if you really looked at his play last year, I think it was all based on a hope of the ceiling of what Will Levis could be. And he just frankly hasn't lived up to it this season. Last week was a great example of that. And I don't want to put this all on Will Levis, though. I mean, that Kentucky offensive line is just porous. And I think that is a huge reason why Georgia is going to just have a field day in this game. I do think that Kentucky actually covers in this game. I think that Georgia puts up a good number, and I think that they win this game. But, this Kentucky defense isn't anything to slouch at either. People think about the Tennessee game, and that's the only time all year that this Kentucky defense has given up more than 24 points in a game. So Georgia is the second best offense in the SEC and one of the top offenses in the country. So I do believe that they're going to put up points, but I do think that Kentucky is able to do enough to cover in this game. Look, Georgia's had their tough spots this year as well. You look at the Mizzou game, this Kentucky defense is better than that Mizzou defense. So I think that Georgia gets a win in the end. I think Georgia is absolutely the better team, but I do think that Kentucky is able to cover here.
Yeah, Hammer, what's your final thoughts and prediction?
I'll go with Georgia to cover. Finally, we'll disagree on one. I don't disagree that Kentucky's defense will potentially give Georgia some trouble. I think Georgia, again, with it being cold on the road, I could see them not getting to 30 points. Unfortunately, I really don't see where Kentucky's going to score here. So this could be a 28-3 game, and Georgia covers. So I like the Dogs to cover. I mean, look, they're rolling right now. We're in the home stretch of the season, and Georgia doesn't really have anybody. Their rivalry game is Georgia Tech, so there's not a look ahead. There's nothing going on, and this is a game that Georgia probably early on in the year had circled. A road game against what a lot of people thought was a good Kentucky team. So I think they'll be ready to play, and I really just don't see Kentucky scoring enough offensively to stay under that that point spread. So I'll take the Dogs to cover.
All right, boss man.
I think that's this is one of those games where on paper it looks like it should go that way, right? But then Will Levis somehow pulls out 2 touchdowns out of his you-know-what, or Chris Rodriguez is able to get it going just enough, or Kentucky gets a turnover, inside the 30 and is able to punch one in, gets a backdoor cover late, something like that. That's kind of what I'm looking at as to why I think Kentucky will cover. I do think Georgia gets an easy win here, though. I don't think that it's ever really in question. I just think that this spread is a little bit high for what this Kentucky defense can do, and what I think Kentucky's going to be able to do on offense, which is not much, but just enough to cover.
Yeah, boss man, I think you forgot about the golden rule when it comes to college football, and that is never bet on a team that just got beat by Vanderbilt against the number 1 team in the country.
That's exactly why, because nobody believes in Kentucky. And that's exactly when chaos happens in college football.
All right, 2:30 Central Time on CBS. Georgia at Kentucky. Georgia's a 22.5-point favorite. The over-under is at 48.5. Next up, we have Tennessee and